The real estate market here in Anchorage, Alaska continues to be a market that we really want to pay attention to because it is the largest market in all of Alaska, and it is starting to show some interesting signs as we move forward. My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor with Keller Williams in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today what we're going to be looking at is Anchorage, Alaska. And it continues to be a pretty interesting market to watch. Before we get started though, as always, give this video a like, subscribe, and let's go and jump into the market update. Now, the first thing that we're going to look at is what's going on in the residential side. And the first thing we want to know on the residential side is what's going on in the active inventory. How many homes are currently on the market? Well, we're actually seeing a decrease on the number of properties that are on the market. For the last month, we have the most current information on, which is going to be August, because this is September at time of this filming in 2022. And what we're seeing is that the number of properties available on the market this time last year was about 490. Now it's about 420. Now, this is significant to me because we actually usually see a little bit of an increase in the inventory in the month of August, but instead we're seeing a decrease from what we had the year before. And keep in mind, that is down by about a third or maybe even a half. Well, half at the most. Usually it's about a third from what we saw this time previous years that we have the information for. So inventory is still pretty low. Now, the next thing that we're seeing is the number of properties that actually sold. They did go down a little bit, but not as much as you would think given the really constricted inventory. We see the number of properties that sold this time last year on the residential side in Anchorage was about 360. Now it's about 330. So we see a little bit of a drop. Not a whole lot though. Now, the next thing that we see is the average sold price for properties in Anchorage. Contrary to predictions from some people, has not dropped by any stretch of the imagination. The average sold price this time last year in Anchorage year to date was about $424,000. Now it's about $458,000, meaning we are seeing a 7.93% average sold price increase, which is actually an increase for the average sold price from what we saw the year before. Because before, we saw that sold price was actually right about 6.9% increase. So despite interest rates going up, we are still seeing the rate at which the average sold price continues to go up. And actually the rate at which it's going, at least in Anchorage at this moment, is higher than what it was the year before. So that's just kind of interesting. What we saw the past couple of years is the average sold price actually has gone up nearly $60,000 in Anchorage compared to the same time this year back in 2020. Sorry, I got back from a long trip just a little bit ago. I'm kind of struggling this morning. Let's see if I can get through this video. The next thing we're going to look at is what's going on as far as the properties that are available on the market for condos. Now, for condos, we see that this time last year there was about 245,000. This year it's about 210. So a little bit of a decrease, not a whole lot, but that is still a really precipitous drop from what we've seen in previous years. You know, the past couple years, it's kind of been an anomaly. It's interesting looking at the inventory there. You can see it's almost a straight line across the entire year for the number of properties that are available, but that line continues to get lower and lower every year. So there's not really this spike in inventory across the year. There's not a whole lot of seasonality, at least on the condo side at this point. Now, looking at the number of properties that have actually sold, we see that this time last year, there was about 130 properties that actually sold in the condos. Now it's about 111. So we do, again, see a little bit of a drop in the number of properties that have actually sold. When you take that in consideration with the number of properties that are available, it's about the same ratio, the same pending ratio. In other words, the number of properties that are available versus the number that have actually closed. That's still about the same. So yeah, that still means there's a lot of healthy demand for condos in Anchorage. Now, the next thing we need to look at is what's going on in the average sold price for condos in Anchorage. So across the board, we are seeing a pretty healthy increase. I believe that's probably about a 4 or 5% increase year over year. Year to date. Look at July and look at May though. We are seeing about a $40,000 and $50,000 increase for those specific months. So it's really just kind of all over the place. And the reason that we see more fluctuation this past year than what we've seen in previous years is because the number of properties that have actually sold has been going down, because the number of properties available has been going down, which creates more volatility in these prices when we're trying to track it, because one high-priced condo can really throw the entire thing off a lot easier than it can if it were, in a group of about 1,000. So that's why we're seeing so much ups and downs there. We are consistently seeing about a 4 or 5% increase average sold price for condos and Anchorage. So let's take a break here real quick. For those of you who've been watching for a bit, you do know that I host a podcast called the Alaskan Journey Podcast. It really does chronicle and explores the story of people who have recently moved up here to Alaska. So if you're considering moving up here, do make sure you go check that out. And also, if you are a seller here currently and you're considering getting your property on the market, do make sure that you go register to my website and put seller guide in the little comment section when you're trying to register, just so I know I can send you a seller guide that's going to really break down a lot of the steps for you for what it's like getting your property on the market. Now, let's go and finish today's market update looking at the multifamily sector. The multifamily section of the real estate market here, it's going to kind of mimic the condo market actually from what I'm seeing, because again, not a whole lot of seasonality going on in the multifamily sector of the real estate market, just because the inventory is going down so much and we're not seeing this real seasonal spike around the summertime when a lot of people are trying to be geared up and ready to go. So not seeing a whole lot of movement month to month for this past year. It's interesting because the biggest difference you see is there was 69 properties available at 1 month, and there was 1 month we went up to about 77. So, despite there being a lot of demand for multifamilies because rents are up, not seeing a whole lot of movement and people wanting to sell their properties right now, because this time last year there's about 155 that are available on the market. Now it is 77. So that's roughly about half we usually have. And again, I think the reason for that is, rents are up really across the entire board. And when rents are up, it's a good time to be a landlord. Now, one thing we are seeing is that even though there's a lot of demand for multifamily, that doesn't necessarily mean that just everything on the market is going to sell. This time last year, there was 36 properties that sold. This year, it's 22. So what that's really telling me is we have a lot of multifamily property owners that are just getting mesmerized looking at the residential side, and they're getting that confused and going, oh, look, well, there's like a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 increase year over year on the residential side. Clearly, that's how it works on the multifamily side. And that's not really how it works. Your value of your multifamily property is tied to your rental income, and a lot of these private landlords aren't really keeping up with the market. So a lot of their properties are under rented, like might be charging $1,200 and they could be getting $1,400 or $1,500 for their rent, and think they're just cutting people a really nice deal, being really nice. But what that does is that decreases the value of their property because they get evaluated off of their numbers, not off of their potential. So we are starting to see that. Sorry, I'm not sure how I got onto that side. No, but yes, we are seeing that even though there's a lot of demand, not every house is going to sell proportionally. We're still selling quite a few houses. It's just not what we had before, where the inventory went down and the number of properties went up at the same time. There's starting to be a little bit of a mellowing out of the process. Now, the thing that I know a lot of investors are really interested in, the average sold price this time last year was about $500,000. Now it's about $520,000. So modest increase overall for what we're seeing for multifamilies in Anchorage. But again, really what that comes down to is, how your rents are performing, what condition your property is, and all that stuff. Just because there's a $20,000 increase doesn't necessarily mean that it applies to your specific property. It might be more, it might be less. The year before, we were sitting about a 15% increase year over year. So we're starting to see a little bit of a reeling in of the acceleration and the rate at which things can increase. So that's promising if you want to get into it. Still healthy if you're an owner, because any kind of increase is welcome. So that has been your overall market update. I hope it was useful. If you have any questions for me, do make sure that you drop a comment down below, and we'll see you next time.